Hello, everyone. So good morning, good afternoon, and maybe good evening, maybe good night, because I'm pretty sure we attract a global audience for these webinars with a topic like this. So I'm joined today by a number of people. Some are, very knowledgeable about this topic within Panaya, and then we've also got some influencers. But just to give people a minute or two to join, we're just going to figure out, where actually are you joining from? Like I said, this topic will attract a global audience. But Oz, where are you based?
Hi, well, thanks, Lucy. Hi, I'm from Israel. Now it's afternoon time,
Yes.
sunset.
Is it hot?
Quite hot, yeah, but the air condition is working, so it's okay.
Okay. Are you someone that would prefer to be too hot or too cold?
I'm the too hot guy for hot.
Yeah, me too. I'm cold-blooded. So yeah, I'm like a reptile. And Guillermo, where are you dialing in from?
Yeah, I'm dialing in from Chicago, Illinois, USA, and it is a gorgeous 63 Fahrenheit here.
Yeah, and I think we've also got someone else stateside. So Eric.
Yeah, exactly. I am coming in from Evansville, Indiana, due south from Guillermo by about 6 hours if you were to drive it. And it's probably very similar to Guillermo's weather down here, except maybe just a couple of degrees warmer. So pretty pleasant.
It always makes me laugh because I'm like, oh, Illinois, Indiana, next to each other, but you're saying 6 hours?
Yeah.
Coming
Yep.
from, yeah, coming from
It's a very skinny, very tall state.
coming from the UK, you just don't think how long that distance would be. But
Yep.
yes, good stuff. All right, so I think we can get started. So yes, maximizing Salesforce team productivity through AI, and this is a far-reaching topic, but we've got, you've met some of them already, a number of voices to contribute to all aspects of this topic. So let's get started. Next slide, please. Great. So yeah, we've met some of them. Lars, unfortunately, I forgot to ask you where you're dialing in from. I think it might be somewhere in Europe, but you go first. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm in Copenhagen, Denmark. And there are no two places in Denmark that are 6 hours apart either. So small place. I'm a partner at Implement Consulting Group, which is a management consultancy. I'm a Salesforce CTA, and I have been in the ecosystem for the past 14 years. And I wrote a book on architecting AI solutions with Salesforce.
Good stuff. Eric?
Yes, good morning, good evening, everyone. As I mentioned earlier, I am calling in, connecting in. Why do we still say dialing, I wonder? From Southwest Indiana in the United States. I am a longtime Salesforce MVP in the Hall of Fame now as well, and I'm the founder of Midwest Dreamin'. By day, I am an independent consultant focusing in on marketing strategy and content creation for ISV partners. Been in the ecosystem since 2009.
Wow. It's becoming a bit of a battle who's been in. But I know that Oz, you have a lot of experience, especially with this topic that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Oz Lavi. I am the CTO of Panaya Foresight, as I mentioned, based from Israel, in the industry of the software industry in general for 20 years, starting with the world of the AI, getting into the Salesforce ecosystem as well, building this product of Panaya Foresight and bringing it to the ecosystem. Happy to be here and discuss those topics.
And Guillermo?
Hi, my name is Guillermo Padroni, based out of Chicago, Illinois, USA. I've been in the ecosystem since approximately 2008, give or take 6 months. Been managed, I'm a director and architect at Generate Capital. And yeah, been around the block. Also a Salesforce, former Salesforce MVP, now Hall of Famer. Run a couple tech events on the West Coast, and generally Salesforce up to not host.
Great, good stuff. And with most webinars, we don't have this many speakers, so I think this makes it really special that we have all these voices here. In case anybody was wondering, I'm Lucy Mazelon. I'm the head of ops at Salesforce Bend. So as the ecosystem grows, things pop up. It's our challenge to keep up with that, but also our growing team as well. So formerly I was a Salesforce and Pardot consultant, well, now account engagement, but yeah, I will leave it to these guys to feed in on what they know. So let's continue to the agenda. Great. So yeah, a glimpse into the future, how AI will impact the Salesforce ecosystem. There's been so much, I suppose, thought leadership about this over the past year. I mean, wasn't ChatGPT only launched last November? So we're not even 11 months. And the whole Salesforce aspect of it was March this year. So relatively, the adoption or the take up of this conversation has just gone like a hockey stick. So it's a question on everyone's minds, and would love to hear what these guys have to say about it. So what do we have today? Yeah, there's been lots announced at Dreamforce. Some that, will need demystifying, some that will come quite soon into our hands, I think. And then we're going to go to Panaya's vision. So change intelligence, like actually having the tools is one thing, but migrating your business successfully to use them is another. And then we're going to go to a case study so you can actually visualize this or understand it a bit better. Generate capital, which I believe, Guillermo, you're going to be leading that section. And then finally a live demo again, so you can contextualize all of this new information that might be a bit buzzwordy, but we're going to bring it all to center for you guys. So yeah, why don't you kick off, Lars?
Will do. Okay, so I think, everybody now knows that the generative AI will have an impact on their role in the Salesforce ecosystem. I think it's a given now that there will be some impact. We don't necessarily know quite how much. And it's definitely true that the impact will be different depending on what role we're in, right? So, the estimates, there was a Harvard study came out yesterday saying that, on average, knowledge workers gain a 40% productivity boost from using generative AI tools, but it varies tremendously by role, right? So if we look at some typical Salesforce roles, if you're an admin, there's going to be a lot of typical configuration tasks that will be automated away as these sort of co-pilot and similar tools get rolled out, right? Simply because you will be able to tell the AI, go and update the permission set to reflect these 3 changes, and it'll do it across a number of different areas. You won't have to do that yourself. There's also going to be repetitive maintenance type tasks, data maintenance, and then things like that, which you can probably automate away. On the other hand, obviously somebody needs to manage the AI and to make sure that it's done properly, and that what the outcome is actually matches the expectations, right? So administrators will probably have a little army of AI helpers that will help with their work. Developers, I mean, this is one of the areas where it's most impressive, right? You can tell ChatGPT or similar to just generate a class, and they'll generate the class for you, generate a Lightning Web Component for you, generate a batch job for you. All of these things are great until you hit a wall, right? Because it's not that super reliable. So if you don't know what you're doing, you can very easily get into a situation where you might have hard to debug code, or code that doesn't follow the right conventions, and so on and so forth. And that extends to sort of the DevOps lifecycle, right? You can generate unit tests from existing code, but are the unit tests correct, right? Somebody needs to check that. I think architects is usually not one of the areas where you sort of think a lot about generative AI impact, but there is actually quite a lot, because a lot of what we do as architects is generate options. We analyze sort of pros and cons, and we suggest different options to requirements and things like that. And much of that sort of initial groundwork can probably be done by generative AI, if not today, then soon. Which again means that we have to zoom out a little bit and focus on things like the wider architecture concerns and how the practice and the governance of the project is going to look. Consultants, it's somewhat the same story as with the administrators, except that obviously, if we're doing implementation of new things, we potentially can automate a number of configuration tasks that in the past we need to have done manually, right? And may lead, the positive side of that is it may lead to us having more time to understanding customer needs and opportunities and really go into getting the right solution as opposed to spending all our time doing configuration. Now, if we look at sort of the product ownership side, I think actually this is one of the most exciting areas, right? Because right now as a product owner, you're often like swamped with requests and requirements, and you can't really take all the feedback in and get it, like figure out where is the real value. And generative AI can do that, right? It can look at all of these requests. It can help you identify trends, group requirements by what value it adds to stakeholders, and means that you can do a much deeper analysis of what will really bring value to your roadmap. So I think that's quite exciting. Now, I mean, there's obviously the question of what's it going to do to jobs, right? There is sort of a potential downside if we automate a lot of stuff away. Does that mean jobs are going to go away? I just want to say that having been in IT for a long time, right, I've seen some shift, right? The shift from something like C++ to higher level languages like Python and so on, right? It was a huge productivity boost for developers, but it didn't exactly lead to fewer developers, it led to a lot more developers. So I think we need to be careful about assuming that just because we can do more, that also means that jobs will be lost. A lot of the time in IT, what seems to happen is that as we get the opportunity to do more, we do more, as opposed to cut roles. So.
Yes, I totally agree. And what I love about this slide is that actually there's so much information to digest here. But out of all of these, I know you pinpointed developers and maybe a couple of others, but who do you think out of all these roles are really prime for Gen AI to really, improve their workload?
I actually think that the people who can really use it tomorrow are the product owners and the BAs, right? Because they can go in and they can analyze, like you've got lots of stuff in Jira. You can put that directly into ChatGPT now. You can have it generate some code for a little prototype that you can test with users and all of that stuff. And that doesn't really require it to be deeply embedded within Salesforce. So a lot of the other stuff, we're kind of waiting for the Salesforce tooling to be ready. You don't quite need that as much in those roles. So that would be my pick.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And even simple things like summarization of requirements or notes from users, UAT notes or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great.
Cool. Great. All right. I think we can go to the next slide. So now, a lot of people, and I just did it, will focus on greenfield scenarios as opposed to brownfield. I don't know if everybody knows the greenfield brownfield distinction, but greenfield is when we do something new. Brownfield is when we've got an old system and we need to change it, right? I think it's actually an architectural or sort of a city planning metaphor.
When we were speaking before, I said, people know greenfield sales, like a greenfield account, but brownfield is the opposite. It's trodden ground.
Yeah. So I think that's the way of saying it. So I mean, there's a tendency with this generative AI to focus on new stuff because it generates stuff, right? It's in the name. It's generative. We build new code and all of that stuff. But actually, one of the most exciting areas, I think, is how it can help us make changes in a better way to old systems, right? What we're dealing with in Salesforce a lot of the time these days is systems like customers who have had Salesforce for 5-10 years. They've been through a number of implementations. They've got a lot of legacy. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be understood, and probably a lot of the people who were there when they built it don't work for the organization anymore, right? So, I mean, I think a lot of us have been in situations where there have been areas of the system that are really hard to change because we don't fully understand them, right? And here is, I think, a perfect use case for generative AI, because it will read through, I mean, these thousands of lines of code and configuration, it will give us good summaries of what that means. It can help us visualize it, explain it. It can map out the dependencies and the consequences between that configuration and that code. And it can help us highlight where are the risks and problem areas. So we can get an entirely different level of understanding than we've been able to in the past. Because in the past, we simply wouldn't have had the time to look through all of that. I don't, on a typical project, I don't have time to read through 20,000 lines of code before I do anything. Generative AI can do that easily, a few minutes, I'll be fine. And it can give me a summary. So that really helps. It also helps us, obviously, in making the changes, right? So we can go in and we can help automatically refactor the code base. We can do test generation so that we get a sort of a good regression baseline before we make changes. We can look at different options for changing code and configuration because we can generate them quickly. And we can have, a more direct link between the requirements that we feed to the system and the code of the configuration that gets generated, right? Because we can use that as effectively an input. So again, in a situation where it's a complex environment and we need to effectively clean it up as we build, that I think can be very powerful. And then obviously that's the question of getting it to production, right? The real worry here is we build something and then something else breaks somewhere else. So by having automatically generated regression test suites again, on the assumption that we've checked them and the tests are good and all of that, right? And that really helps. And like you can even think a little bit further into maybe slightly. It's not 100% there, but things like self-healing code is a big trend right now, where we hit an error, we send the error back to the language model, and the language model actually updates the code dynamically to address those errors. And that's again quite powerful. It also, we can, as a consequence of the deeper understanding, we can now do a greater automation of deployment, right? A lot of the time there are manual deployment steps and things like that, which have been difficult to handle automatically. With the higher degree of language understanding that you get from large language model, you can automate more of that deployment into production. So I think that's a really exciting area for deployment that is probably not addressed as much in the sort of thought leadership literature as it ought to be. So next slide. I'm just going to say, I'm going to touch very briefly here on the fact that although there are really exciting options right now with the large language models, there's also a lot of challenges. And to some extent, the subtitle to this slide could be why you need the Einstein GPT trust layer. So it's effectively why Salesforce have built this whole trust layer to make sure that you can adopt LLMs is largely because there are these kinds of challenges, right? So large language models, they can produce toxic text. They are inherently biased because the text they're trained on is biased. So you do need something that checks for that. They can generate hallucinations, which I'm sure everybody knows about, right? They can, they will on occasion just make things up, even though it's, you haven't asked for it. It will make up an answer, or it'll make up a number that's not in the source material. And there isn't really 100% reliable way of getting around that. You can't really be sure that even though you specify a format, that you get the same format back all the time. Sometimes it'll give you an answer that isn't super relevant. And obviously there are security worries, right? You can use there's new attacks like prompt injection, where you get you compromise the language model by injecting a prompt from outside. There are privacy concerns, where they're going to store the data and the prompts that go out. And then, finally, the user interface, right? We're now rolling out a lot of chat-based user interfaces, but it's not clear that a chat-based user interface is the right way of dealing with all use cases for generative AI, right? Especially if we want to have high reliability, we may want to find ways of constraining that user experience so that it looks more like a conventional user experience, but uses a large language model under the hood. And I don't think anybody really knows where that boundary is yet in terms of exposing the large language model directly to the users versus hiding it away. And with that, I will stop.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, so earlier this week we put out a poll on the Salesforce Ben LinkedIn, and polls, get a lot of attention, but this one got a lot of attention. We got 671 votes. Just before that, I did a count up before the start of this webinar. And in the poll, we asked, how comfortable are you using AI tools? And I don't want to sway your answer, but how about we launch the poll and then get everybody's answers and compare them? Absolutely. So how comfortable are you using AI for your Salesforce tasks? It's a game changer. You're still getting the hang of it. You have mixed feelings and you just prefer the old ways. So yeah, cast your votes. Be interesting to see how it compares to what we got on LinkedIn. Should we give it another minute? Come on, everyone, put your answers. Yeah. Okay, I think we can conclude now. So, okay. 30. Oh, wow. Okay, so it's a game changer. Was 34% on this webinar, 31% on our poll. So, I think obviously people interested in this webinar are interested in AI, still getting the hang of it. 31% on this webinar, 25% over on our poll. Mixed feelings, pretty much the same, but prefer the old ways. We had 9% on LinkedIn and 6% here. So you guys are a lot more open to AI as a concept from what it seems.
More early adopters into, yeah.
Yeah, we have the early adopters here. Great. I mean, what would you guys vote?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Go on, Oz, what would you vote if you had to vote?
I think I must say it's still not clear. I think it's going to be a game changer. This is my true. It's still not. We're still getting the hang of it and starting to understand where and how to use it exactly and get used to it into our day-to-day job. So this is it's going to be a game changer very, very soon.
Yeah, and this is something you've been thinking a lot about as well. So
yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on a little bit and then talk about the AI tools in the perspective from Salesforce. A lot of this was discussed at Dreamforce for those of you who attended. Dreamforce, they made the big announcement, if you will, about the Einstein 1 Data Cloud and platform. And what they talked about then was the fact that that's enabling the creation of a unified customer profile, basically bringing in data from any source, bringing AI automation and analytics to the forefront of the customer experience. And so if you think about the way Salesforce has been doing business for years, they've almost always been focused exclusively, not exactly exclusively, but very, very heavily on what the customer experience looks like, what the customers of Salesforce and the customers of companies that build on Salesforce, what that experience looks like, how they can generate new business, how they can operate. And bringing AI into that mix, I think is really interesting. It lets you do a lot of things much quicker and more robust, and create solutions that maybe you wouldn't have thought about on your own, just from sitting back kind of analyzing what's going on. The models that are out there obviously have access to lots and lots more data and capabilities than the human mind. So the power and capabilities that it brings in has the ability to really expand the things that you're able to do. Salesforce also talked about Einstein Copilot Studio, And while a lot of people, I think, kind of consider that a developer tool more than an admin tool, it's really something I feel like admins and managers really still need to be aware of because of what it allows. And it really enables them to be able to build custom generative AI apps using the low-code approach that Salesforce has been talking about for quite a while now too. And it enables them and helps them to create prompt and skill builders where they're able to bring in the AI into all sorts of different areas. The quote there from Parker Harris I thought was really interesting. He said, "A company's AI strategy is only as good as its data strategy." And I think what he was really trying to say when he mentioned that was that the data that you have within your own Salesforce instance is really what's going to help generate what the AIs are capable of doing for your own Salesforce instance. Parker went on to say, while he was talking about this, that the metadata framework built into Salesforce can seamlessly bridge across applications, driving innovation and increasing productivity and reducing costs. And that's what everybody using Salesforce is really wanting to do, is to get more productive, lower their costs, become more profitable. So that really applies in and ties really well back to some of the things Lars was just mentioning earlier too. Let's go to the next slide, please. So some of the other tools that were announced at Dreamforce, AI for Sales, which is really geared towards arming sellers with both predictive and generative AI to help inform them and assist through the sales cycle. This is going to be able to help automate the sales process so that the sellers can actually spend more time doing the things that sellers really should be doing, which is building relationships and building trust with their customers. We all know that people tend to buy from those they know and trust. So being able to focus more time on that from a sales perspective can certainly only help build those relationships and increase business. From a customer service perspective, AI is going to allow people to deliver a much more personalized experience in a much faster manner and help them scale and drive more value quickly. AI customer service is going to generate more revenue, increase productivity, and one of the things we already talked about, automating case summaries based on the history and of the cases, and helping those people who come into the mix further down the line, where they're helping another customer of that same company really understand the interactions that company has had with Salesforce and with that particular platform over time. Next slide. So they also talked about marketing and commerce quite a bit at Dreamforce this year. Marketing AI is really out there to help enable marketers to drive personalization and productivity at scale. And again, this is using both predictive and generative AI built into the marketing platforms. So what that allows them to do is automate segment creation, as an example, from descriptive prompts and to calculate metrics like propensity to buy and help expand the reach more quickly. And one of the things I thought was really pretty interesting was the ability to use what they call lookalike models, where you can simply tell the AI, start the process on this particular item using something that you've already built, and use that as the basis and move forward from there. From the commerce side of things, it's helping to unlock the business potential by really helping merchants achieve more using actionable and trusted data with the guidance powered by AI. So what they called Commerce Concierge is going to connect seamlessly with the most popular messaging apps, offering natural language and image-based data-driven interactions to simplify product searches, provide more personalized responses, and streamline the purchase process for the customers that are making those purchases, really across all the digital landscape and all the various channels they may interact with the organizations. Lots of really interesting stuff. As Oz kind of talked about earlier, I think it's going to become a game changer. I don't think it's quite there yet, but it's coming soon.
Well, thank you for that, Eric. I was also going to ask you as well, but you'd obviously thought about that answer. Maybe you'd reconsidered it over time, but yeah, you're kind of in that middle ground as well. Like, it will be a game changer, but we're not there right now.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
Okay, so when we are talking when we think in Panaya about our AI approach and strategy, I think from our point of view as a change intelligence platform, is what if our orgs could talk to us, could tell us what's happening within them, can explain exactly how things are actually built, how things are working, what is not working. And first, before we move forward, and I think this is something that was great, is you can write in the chat, just everybody, any participant, just some example of what would your org would say if he was able to talk. It will be just interesting to see, what you have in your mind that your org would say about it. So you're most welcome to send some comments on that in the chat.
The funny, I mean, I want to say that our org is very clean. We have quite a simple org, but I've worked in many companies that their orgs would just be crying, going, there's so many custom objects or packages or lookups all over the place. Lookups, like trying to pass data via lookups to another object. It's, someone's just said technical debt is too high. But, we're only human, and day to day, we can't obviously monitor everything our org is trying to tell us. But that's the whole point of what Oz is going to talk about. If your org had a voice and could tell you, almost like the co-pilot aspect for users that Eric was just talking about, but a co-pilot for builders, just think about what your org would say about you behind your back.
Totally. And when we see orgs, and I want to reflect back to what Lars was talking about, again, about brownfield, and I think it's a bigger challenge, changing something existing, something that is an org that is productive. And as you mentioned, Lucy, some heavy orgs with a lot of customization that are working in production and are heavily customized, and go and use AI in this environment can be something of a risk. And as we discussed, all the challenges of the large language models can be a challenging area. And this is, I think, an interesting path for the generative AI area in the Salesforce ecosystem, to see how we are working with our production org, how we are working with our complex, long legacy org with a lot of technical debt. And this is what we are finding as interesting in Panaya when we are doing talking about change intelligence, which eventually is the ability to understand what actually is happening inside our organization, inside our org, in our implementation. Then I think generative AI just coming and fitting very, very good in the way of helping us to understand what the org is saying to us. And this is exactly, the brownfield area that I think is most painful for most of us. And reflecting back also to the question of our work and our jobs, I think nobody will allow AI very soon, in the coming future, to do changes and self-healing automatically on my production org. We will need a man in the middle, somebody to orchestrate it, to check it, to validate it. I think this is what will be our challenge, because we will get offers, very confident offers of changes and fixes from the AI tools, but are they really good? Because we all know that if we're talking about ChatGPT, it can talk in a very confident way, but it's not always true. So this will also hold for other tools, and until we will build this right of confidence, we will still need the man in the middle. And this is, I think, what the ability to bridge this gap together is a big challenge for us. Moving forward, another thing that worth thinking about when we are looking about Salesforce implementation and how we are seeing AI in the middle, eventually when we are talking about implementation teams of Salesforce organization, it is eventually translating the business process level into the technical, into the implementation level, which is actually what is running in the background. This is the value that we create as implementers in the Salesforce, that we're creating the business processes to work as they expected to be inside the implementation. And this gap is have a lot of tools and capabilities, and this translation process we are talking about validation, which is testing, and we're talking about requirement generation, which is the definitions. And all those processes takes a lot of time. And I think that AI can really help in bridging the gap between those two parts. And as Lars mentioned, as we are getting higher and higher level in the implementation, I think it's opening up our capabilities. Today, we are bounded by our implementation capabilities. If we will enlarge them and we will be able to do more, then I'm sure we get more and more requirements and more business agility into our organizations. So this is exactly the thing that we are focusing, and this is what's keeping us up at night, how we can leverage the AI power and simplify the ability to understand our world and simplify the ability of the understanding and translating the business process and the technical implementation level. So this is what we are doing, and we introduced lately the Foresight Explain, our AI solution that is helping us to understand immediately what exactly is happening in our org. It's taking two parts together, both our impact analysis engine and together with the generative AI implementation, and we bring it together into a simple flow of explaining how things are actually working inside our organization, if we're looking at in the different aspects, and we will see it soon in action. But before getting into a demo of it, I would like to pass it over to Guillermo to talk about from a customer point of view.
Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so just like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which for those that didn't study psychology in school, it's basically the fundamentals of what humans need, the base level fundamentals, before you can get to the higher level, like educational goals and things like that, food, water, shelter, comfort, blah, 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 blah. So same thing with using tools and technology and just running your teams, right? You have to first instill a general continuous learning mindset, right? You've got to ensure that your team gets education and is willing and open to continuously learn in general. Obviously, the Salesforce platform, which is the primary focus of our conversation, is it's constantly growing, it's constantly expanding, it's constantly changing. Therefore, you're gonna have to learn in this specific career focus area, right? So, and that education equals growth, continuous growth, and growing up into architects, technical architects, and things like that, or analysts. And in order to, you also have to instill that there are challenges that you provide your teams, right? Nobody wants to do the same monotonous thing over and over and over and over. So you want to make sure that each of your team members is given a challenge that might be outside of their primary skill set or primary duties. So, testing the water, seeing how they do in general. And like I tell my kids, right? You can only learn by your struggle or by your challenge. Therefore, this is a great way to not just provide education in classes and content, but also giving them the opportunities to struggle and learn and grow. And then once you have that knowledge and growth and education, that starts to empower and give your teammates courage or the adaptability and the ability to scale generally, which essentially your teams are only as good as the weakest link. Therefore, you want to provide the education, the challenge, the knowledge to give your individual constituents the growth, the learning, and the power to become better, faster, smarter for your organization and for your team. You have that basic level of fundamental thing. There's also giving them not just an item to break and build, right? You want to make sure you give them context. You want to make sure they understand, like, why am I doing this task? Why am I doing this project, right? Sure, I can build a formula, a validation rule, a trigger, a lightning web component, a flow, whatever, check all the dots that you want, right? But if they're just doing something to do it, they're not really, applying education challenge or knowledge, generally speaking. They're just doing a job. They're breaking a rock. So you really want to bring them into the fold, understand the project goals, initiatives, the vision, the requirements, and the who, what, where, when, and why. One, so they actually know maybe they can provide their own strategy or guidance based on what they understand of the process. And again, you got to give them a reason to care, right? If once they have value in the project and once they know the point, they're actually going to probably provide more value, more insight, and provide more, what is it called? Just energy into the task at hand. And it gives them a sense of accomplishment. Also, make sure you give people space and work within the team to understand, like, how long does a task take? How, what does it entail to actually execute said project or process or whatever it is, right? Because, as you start to do like agile methodology, water methodologies, or just do discovery sessions, you really got to figure out, like, how long is something going to take, theoretically and practically speaking. So once you have that, right, then you can start bringing in tools, software. Many people, the business typically thinks, a software product off the shelf will solve every problem. I'm sure we can take a poll and be like, how many business constituents always think, yes, software will solve the solution, right? Typically, all it does is it's a tool in your tool belt, just like AI. So in that situation, right, the tools can facilitate resolution, but they will not actually fix any problem. They just help structure problems. And just like AI, right, as we'll talk. But as you introduce AI into your teams, right, there are two base constituents that you'll be focusing on. With new team members, or let's call them new team members and or junior entry level associates, whatever you want to call them, depending on where you are in the world. In one aspect, when you have a truly entry level associate level person, AI can definitely help you accelerate. It gives you, just like education in general, it's not the solution and end all be all, but AI can give you a stepping stone or two or three to allow individual new learners to accelerate their knowledge and offset some education rapidly. I think as Lars mentioned before, right? It can consume thousands of pieces of information and digest it, boil it down into just 5 bullet points, right? Give me what I need to know so I can continue to run faster. On the flip side, I think as Eric had said, right, and Parker Harris said, good data, good results. Complicated, less than good data, we'll see how bad the hallucinations regurgitate your bad information. So with that being said, you may not have an associate level member, but if you introduce AI to consume your Salesforce data, those new employees who might be very senior or very experienced, they don't understand the business context. They don't understand the business models. They don't understand the processes that you're running. And AI can help analyze your org and analyze your data sets in the future, realistically. Probably coming a lot faster than we all anticipate, hopefully sooner, possibly later, I don't know. But essentially, those processes might be able to give us context rapidly so that, what does my company do? What does this business unit do? Like, what is an average life cycle of a particular process or deal or support implementation, blah, 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 blah. And that might help accelerate the internal employee onboarding to your processes. The question is, again, how good is the data? And then for existing members, employees, technical resources, whatever that might be, put on your hat of choice. The benefit here is we, as senior leaders or senior resources, maybe we already know how to build a formula pretty complex, or a flow or a lightning web component, blah, 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 insert text here. The benefit for us in general, or for you in general, is you can get to answers faster. What might have taken you, 2 discovery calls, trying to figure out certain things, knowledge, you're busy with family life and everything else. And then you're taking a shower and you're like, oh, I just remembered that idea that I forgot in that discovery call. For those of us, it just allows us to have a conversation, apply enough context, and then you'll get to the answer that you want to come up with eventually, almost instantaneously in general. Next slide, please. So let's talk about.
Sorry, Guillermo.
That's okay. You're good.
The previous slide, and we don't have to go back to it, but what really resonated with me is not only just junior members or junior associates or whatever, but just anybody inheriting an org. I think what ties together this whole conversation is orgs, not only are they becoming more complex, we've been saying that for about 5 years, they're getting older, and then we're trying to now put an AI layer over them. We need to have a better understanding of that change intelligence to go forward, not just only for juniors, but for anybody inheriting an org. Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and technically speaking, Panaya's AI solution that we're going to demo towards the end of the presentation, it actually can get you some of that context. Definitely, it opens the door to that context, which is going to be very interesting how customers apply it in general. So yes, knowledge is power.
Awesome.
Great. So let's talk about like practically, right? How do I take these AI or large language models and what do I have to actually think about in order to be successful or make them useful to me? I think as Lars said, right? Be careful. There's a lot of trouble. It does require a lot of hand-holding and broadly speaking. So let's talk about like how can it help you be a teammate and be a, but not just right. So essentially have a conversation with your team and make sure they understand what should go into the model or the technologies and what should not go, right? A lot of these, specifically the large language models, they have, privacy concerns. They consume the data. It's just like a big search engine like Google, whatever, insert your search engine of choice. But essentially, if you put it in there, it is now out there, right? Unless you have a private model and, an on-prem or a dedicated cloud specifically geared for your contract, your privacy in general, make sure your constituents understand what tools are out there, how can I apply them, but then be cautious that you don't expose confidential information or private, financial details or, proprietary code, source code. Names will not be named, but there are definitely some big electronic companies that have accidentally exposed some of their internal code. And you could theoretically ask a lot of these more open technologies information about other companies, and it might actually give you some answers. Again, you don't actually know if it's made up 100% or partially true, but buyer beware, user beware. Make sure you understand what your data privacy policies are for each application of use. But again, be open and have that conversation. Transparency, right? Be open about your usage of AI, right? People these days are, there's a population that are scared. There's a population that are excited. I'm definitely in the camp of it is already a game changer, right? If you're using it on a day-to-day basis to accelerate your thought process, your ideation process, that is already a game changer, right? I don't really know a lot of applications out there that you can just have a conversation, throw ideas, scope it down, expand, go into details. I was literally teaching my children in middle school. Let's talk about like storyboarding and writing and creativity. Sometimes my younger daughters have what is it called, writer's block. So I'm like, hey, let's pull up a large language model, tell it about your story, blah blah blah, and it comes out with new ideas. And she may not like them, generally speaking, but it gives her the idea to accelerate and say, ooh, I have a better idea, and I'm going to pivot in that direction. So from an ideation standpoint, it is already a game changer. From a code base, we can argue if it's really a game changer or if it's just opening the door to becoming a change, a change maker or exciting. Ensure also, the big don't here is ensure your employees ground their prompts. Grounding is the concept of ensuring that you put a lot of parameters and requirements and controls in place. Speaking to ensure that you're going to get a good, positive, debatably accurate results, right? In general. And then also make sure, again, a reminder, you're going to have to remember this all the time. AI does not give you absolute perfect answers, right? You have to hold it. You have to review. You have to validate. You have to ensure and, check the sources, check the results. Do not assume any AI generated is 100% valid and true. Don't just copy and paste. I think at Dreamforce, they talked about this in every session, right? We are complementary to each other in general. Next slide, please. And then let's talk about the do's, right? So some of these things we definitely do. Some of these things are more forward-looking about how we will do. Again, encourage your teams. Your teams are probably using these AI tools today, especially if they're free. Some of them are very low cost to get in and just start using anyway, and help you accelerate and get those stepping stones. So don't be shy about it. Have a conversation with your team and say, hey, we should look into this or should not, right? There are some corporate policies that say you cannot do this. There are some corporate policies that are like you can do them within a set of parameters. So if you're a leader or a manager, talk to your leadership, talk to your compliance team, talk to your legal team, and people operations or HR teams. Make sure it's acceptable. 2, make sure that you are talking to your teams and saying, hey, it's okay to use these within some guidance and parameters. And let's have conversations about when, how we would use them, how we would not use them, things like that. And then, there are definitely technologies like Panaya's piece of AI that'll be demoed later. It is amazing. It is really cool. It's a start. It gives you context. It gives you details. It gives you like a summary analysis. It gives you documentation, right, of your org or of a particular function or metadata component that you're ingesting, which is pretty mind-blowing, right? Let's accelerate documentation. LLMs and AI are really good at generating and referencing information. There are things, LLMs, right, out there. You can talk about Bard. You can talk about ChatGPT, Bing Chat, which is just a version of ChatGPT 4. You have Microsoft Copilot that was just announced that is being released, broadly speaking, to enterprise users. You got Salesforce Copilot, and then, there's dozens and dozens more. But these are the ones that you're probably going to use most likely today in general to use and learn and figure things out. A really good use case that we're using, and I've heard many of my architect and analyst friends in the ecosystem use it for discovery meetings, right? Throw in context. I am a consultant at a big 4 company. I am a senior resource and in the context of a COO or a architect strategist, blah, 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 blah. I am talking to a food distribution company or a financial services company, and we are talking about a sales process, a service process. Give a lot of context, that grounding concept, and throw in. We are trying to figure out what are the most realistic life cycle and milestones that must be achieved in a particular business process. Again, if you've been around the block at least a little bit, you're probably going to catch 80 to 90% of what the LLM is already telling you. But again, it might actually give you new ideas or things you didn't think about or aren't yet thinking about. So you can drive a conversation as you're driving a discovery session and have it prompt and give you even questions to ask, right? What should I be asking in a dental world? What should I be asking in a medical device company? What should I be asking, ... insert your industry of choice. So that ideation and that discovery process and that strategy is amazing already today. We don't have to wait for tomorrow. We could have started yesterday already. So yes, it does help you get to ideas faster, and the brainstorming power of it is redunculous. And then, right, more practical stuff, less theoretical things, like it can draft formulas today. You tell it, I am working on the account object. I have X field called, I like to use API names just to kind of ground my prompts better to get more accurate results. I am on object X. I have parameter A, B, and C, and I need to create a formula that outputs the profitability of A, B, and C minus, Z. And as long as you're using API names and everything, it'll actually generate a pretty decent formula. Now, buyer beware, as Lars has mentioned, it may not exactly give you a verbatim, fully working calculation. So definitely test, definitely validate, definitely make sure you regression test, especially if you're tinkering with existing formulas. Other things that we've done is we've been able to copy legacy code and say, okay, what is this, 3,000 character formula or piece of code doing? I don't have time. I'm literally multitasking in a meeting, taking notes, slacking people, but I really need to boil this, thing down to its fundamentals. You can dump it into a prompt. Again, buyer beware, make sure there's nothing confidential in it. But if it's a general formula, totally realistic. You then paste it, tell it, explain it, where is, the gap, and it will actually output and possibly do it. Another really cool thing that we do for, again, legacy code, you can copy a trigger, Visualforce page, whatever, Lightning Web component, dump it in there. Maybe I'm not the best developer, and maybe I only did it in college for a couple semesters, and I didn't really like it. Who knows? But in any case, you can take really lengthy code, dump it into into a large language model and say, hey, regenerate this code as accurate as possible in the context of a Salesforce developer, whatever, and give me, because not every consultant actually gives you comments to have good context. But generally speaking, right, you can have it regenerate the code and give you prompt commenting context so that you can read it faster, better in general. So that's pretty cool. And then again, if it generates brand new code from scratch, be careful, test it, verify it, blah, 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 blah. Really quickly, I know I got to wrap it up here. Writing emails is really cool, and doing case studies.
Yeah, of course. And for anybody that was wondering, yes, the recording will be available afterwards. And obviously there's a whole host of valuable information there, also supported by Guillermo's exploration of all these tools so far. So yeah, any questions, please do drop them in the Q&A. And this recording will be available afterwards. But without further ado, Oz, is it now time for us to see this in action? You are on mute, just by the way, in case you were deliberate.
Okay. So let's jump directly. I think time is rushing us, so we'll jump directly into the product itself. So for the people who don't know Panaya Foresight, as we said, we are a change intelligence platform. We are providing an impact analysis and AI for the Salesforce organization. Basically, we are extracting the entire metadata of the organization, analyzing it, and surfacing it first as a dependency map, as you can see it here. In this case, I'm looking on the opportunity state field, and I can see immediately all the places that is actually used, where there are flows, Apex classes, and much more layouts and every other component that are using it directly, and also the ripple effect of the thing. So what we see here, as we said, is the dependency map of our org implementation, of the metadata implementation of our organization. And the other thing that we're now enabling with the AI is the ability to understand actually what's happening inside the components. So we'll look on this probability calculator, as you can see it here. It's an Apex class. I can go around and just, let's say, view its source for the explanation. And this is a short piece of code that is doing some kind of a probability calculation, probably. But I want to understand exactly what it is doing. And let's say I'm not a pro coder, and I really, in order to understand my business process, I need to understand what's actually happening here. So I will move to the explanation tab, and what will happen here is now that I will get a human readable summary of what the probability calculator class is doing. Okay, and this is all the process, also with detailed description for the step-by-step if I want to drill down a little bit deeper. And this is not a code, it's a human readable language, and this is generated on this component. Same holds also for other components. If I will take, for example, I will close it for now. Let's say it will take this flow, for example, and I will again also select the explain on it. I can also get an explanation on flows. It's also holds for formula fields, validation rules, the more to come and be supported in the future. So this is together the dependency map and the ability to get a quick summary of the relevant components, give me a good overview of my org talking to me and explaining to me what is actually happening. And if we're looking on use cases, so Lucy, you mentioned getting into a new org or an old org, replacing somebody. So the assessment of an organization, assessment of components, and getting an understanding what is actually happening. This is a very common and very useful use case for that. And also when we're doing some change into a very old area that we are not exactly clear what's happening there, what we need to be done, then this can be again very helpful and save us a lot of time and bugs in the execution and in delivery. And if we talked about how AI will accelerate our ability to deliver, we can see it here. We are the phase of understanding can be shortened, and very quickly, in a matter of seconds, get the understanding of how things are actually built and what I need to change moving forward. And again, also when Guillermo were mentioning documentation, we all love documentation. We all love to update the documentation. And I'm sure not everybody is doing that on the full capacity. And this is give us a very quick, accurate, up-to-date documentation of what's happening inside those components. And this is, what's currently was released. And if I will give it just a short glimpse into the future, so we want to summarize it also in the higher level. We talked about taking it to the business level. So take it to the level of the object and be able to generate the explain on the object level, get a summary of all the relevant, most crucial fields inside the data model, the automation that are running, getting a full human readable explanation of a specific object that I can also later on understand different recommendation around it, whether it's around testing and integrity and technical depth, and also can use it as a document in Confluence and export it to further use. So this is the area that we are going to. We are striving to help our organization talk to us and tell exactly what they need and how we can do things better with them. So we can work hand to hand together with them to bring value to the business.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm really impressed. I know obviously what Panaya does, but I love this explain functionality. And I'm so glad you mentioned flows, because some people like me are a little bit behind with learning flows. My bad. But this would then, give an explanation of what's happening within that flow. Also, people coming into a new org, like we just said, that use case, people change all the time, especially consultants. It's not only telling you what's there, but then you can identify very quickly if something's doing something that it shouldn't do, like something inefficient. You're like, why is there so much piled into one process? Why, this should have been retired or whatever. So I really love that aspect as well. And yeah, it's great at the business level as well, so that you can answer any questions that stakeholders have.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I think it's very, very important to today to take this capabilities and use it in the right use case and accelerate this process of understanding. I think it's a very painful, untalked process that we are doing to understand what's happening inside an organization in the investigation phase.
Yeah. And I always have thought, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but change intelligence, the whole category of applications like Panaya, you're stitching together those roles that, Lars, those ones that you spoke about, everybody can use this change intelligence to get on the same page. So yeah, I think that's a good place to conclude, because I think, we're at time, but also there's just a lot to digest. So any final thoughts from any of you? No?
Yeah, I think first I want to say to everybody, thank you for your time and for all the participants that are with us. I think it was very insightful and interesting to see the different angles of AI, different aspects. It was very insightful and pleasure to talk to you guys.
Yeah, we've had a couple of people say how informative it was. Yeah, people love the tool. But I think what's important is that we've gone through the whole context. We've seen it from multiple different points of view on this webinar. So yeah, the recording will be available. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.